On September 23, 2022, in rural Pennsylvania, a Catholic pro-life activist was arrested by the FBI on charges that he had shoved an abortion clinic volunteer, even though state and local officials had already declined to prosecute this case. The feds came with SWAT team members with body armor and bearing long guns and arrested this man in front of his family.
They had, 15 to 20 FBI agents that showed up at the doorstep of this man who's peaceful, who was cooperating with the authorities, who had his own attorney, who was willing to come in. There was no need for it. It was an intimidation tactic.
My friend Mark Houck, he's a friend, and we've worked together in the pro-life arena, until he wakes up one day and he's got dozens of FBI agents outside his house with drawn guns looking at their children. It's like, what is going on here?
My colleague Mary Margaret Olahan did many wonderful, important interviews with Mark and his family, but the FBI came into his house, busted down the door, brought guns into his family's living room with his children and rounded him up and took him out. And ultimately, he was found not guilty because he wasn't guilty.
The prosecution was part of a record increase in Department of Justice prosecutions against pro-life demonstrators under the Biden administration. Meanwhile, in May 2022, an early draft in the June Dobbs v. Jackson decision that did overturn Roe was leaked. Since that leak, the source of which has never been revealed, there have been about 300 attacks against pro-life ministries, such as crisis pregnancy centers. Pro-abortion forces have also attacked many pro-life churches as well. And on it goes. How have the FBI and the Biden Department of Justice responded to these attacks?
The FBI has been asleep at the wheel in the aftermath of the spate of attacks on pro-life organizations, even churches, that occurred in the aftermath, immediately after the Dobbs decision last summer. And that just goes to show us that it is not equal justice under law that animates the FBI, but rather ideology.
Critics note that what we're experiencing too often these days is the weaponization of institutions like the Department of Justice and the FBI in favor of, as an example, abortion rights.
The FBI has been weaponized, the DOJ has been weaponized, district attorneys are weaponizing their authority. It sounds to many like extremist language, but if you really study what is happening, this is nothing other than a Marxist takeover of America. These are people, Marxist inspired, who want to control what we think and control what we do.
One of the worst attacks against pro-lifers was the destruction of a crisis pregnancy center in the greater Buffalo, New York area. On June 7, 2022, in the middle of the night, in Amherst, New York, the Compass Care Center, providing loving alternatives to pregnant women in crisis, was firebombed. To repair the center, the ministry ended up spending $500,000. To this day, no one has been caught.
It's particularly disturbing to see the failure of the FBI to aggressively investigate and find the culprit who's responsible for the attack on the Compass Care Center in the Buffalo area. Because in that case, there was an enormous cost that they had to pay in order to make the necessary repairs after the attack took place. And so they've just failed to do their job as an investigatory organization.
But this is the Biden administration's Department of Justice. They've brought all of these cases against pro-life activists, and they've only brought a handful against the actual violent attackers of these pro-life pregnancy centers and Catholic churches that have seen a rash of attacks, not even starting with the leak of the Dobbs opinion, but before that, even during the summer of George Floyd, Catholic Vote is a wonderful organization, has been monitoring and keeping a list of every single one of these attacks that these pro-life pregnancy centers, which, by the way, they exist to help women in crisis.
Writer Micaiah Bilger of the LifeNews.com website documents that $266 million of free medical services and resources are provided per year by these pregnancy centers.
And yet, we've seen Democrats demonize these organizations as fake clinics, as just smokescreens for attacking women. In one horrific case, the Biden administration has suggested that these clinics are taking information from women and using them to target them with state laws, as though laws that protect unborn infants are actually targeted at penalizing women who think about having abortions.
Out of the 300+ attacks against pro-life organizations and churches in the last year or so, how many bad actors have been brought to justice so far?
The DOJ has opened 2 prosecutions against 4 individuals who had attacked one clinic in Florida. But that is the full extent to which they have taken action against Jane's Revenge. The discrepancy between all the prosecutions of pro-life individuals who are almost entirely just standing there voicing their opposition to the horrific killing of infants in the womb, and the paltry, 4 people getting charged after hundreds and hundreds of attacks, fire bombings, and spray paintings and the smashing of glass and windows. But they are violent and they should be prosecuted. And the discrepancy is appalling.
Who were the ultimate victims of the weaponization of the FBI against the pro-life movement?
I want to say to the women of America, the families of America, and all of the people of America that there has to be a better way to serve women and to protect children without aborting our children. My dream is God's dream, and the dream of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness from the womb to the tomb and beyond includes the babies in the womb, those who are born and live until God takes us home.
We need protection so that as Americans, we can trust our agencies. If people lose trust in their institutions, which is happening rapidly because of the kind of instances that we're seeing here, that's bad for society. Because the FBI should be able to get information from the American people when they need it, right, in order to do an investigation for legitimate reasons.
Justice is supposed to be blind, but what we see today with the Justice Department and the FBI is justice and the investigation of crimes that is driven more by ideology than by a concern for equal justice under law.
I mean, it's so unmoored from reality, but the Biden administration finds every way to weaponize the government, weaponize law enforcement against those who believe the way we believe, against those who want to protect life in the womb.